I'm Ira Bennett. I'm from Arizona State University. I work at the Center for Nanotechnology and Society at the Consortium for Science Policy and Outcomes.
Fantastic.
I'm Jamey Wetmore. I'm at all those places, as well as the School of Human Evolution and Social Change at Arizona State.
Fantastic. So you have come across to Edinburgh as visiting research fellows at the Genomics Forum. What exactly have you been doing whilst you've been over here?
Well, one of the reasons we came over is because we've been working a lot with science museums and science centers in the United States. So we've been bouncing around Europe a bit, visiting these science centers and science museums, and we've done that here in Scotland as well. And yesterday, we put on a workshop for that audience as well.
Yeah.
What did we do while we were there, Jamey, in that workshop?
Well, the workshop is all about finding new ways to engage visitors in science centers and science museums. And in the United States, typically what we've been doing is focusing on how do you get expert science knowledge to the public. And we think that there's actually a new opportunity for engagement in science centers and museums to think about ways of engaging the public in conversations about what they want the future to be. And how do you get values and deal with issues into discussions at a science center?
Great.
And while we were doing this work in the US, we heard rumors that the Europeans had actually gotten ahead of us on this game by years to decades. And so part of our exploration has just been to see where exactly the state of the art over here is. And we found, in fact, that the institutions over here have taken up this sort of idea of conversations, an idea of exploring how technologies interact with people and societies better than our US colleagues have.
That's interesting. And did you find any sort of differences as well between various European audiences? With the audience yesterday in the workshop very responsive?
They were, actually. I mean, the one thing that's been nice is that there's definitely clear evidence that there's certain centers and museums in Europe that have grasped this much better than we have in the US. But I think we're still not so far behind that we can actually be a little bit useful in some places. And so some of our ways of articulating and presenting things, I think people really picked up on yesterday.
Great.
And we brought with us a lot of materials, stuff that hadn't really been available in Europe and the UK yet. So even if they sort of had a sense of what we were talking about, we brought new ways for them to engage their audiences in those conversations and with activities.
That's fantastic. And where might this lead in the future? And if anybody was interested in the project and obviously wasn't able to make the workshop yesterday, can they get information about your work from website, etc.?
The main website is probably our museum colleagues in the United States, NISEnet.org.
NISENET.org.
And that's the Nanoscale Informal Science Education Network. We are academics. We don't pretend to know how to engage audiences. We help to come up with some of the material, and it's our museum colleagues that really help to make it come alive and engaging, and so they run a lot of that sort of outreach issues.
And at that website, which is the NISE Net project is a very large museum network project funded by the National Science Foundation in the U.S. And all of the material that's been developed, the theater materials, the activities, the forum guides, is all online and available.
Oh, please tell us about your other projects.
So actually, this whole partnership with the forum and with the University of Edinburgh started 2 years ago now, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And we found out that Jane Calvert and Emma Froh were doing a series of projects bringing together social scientists and scientists. And this is actually something that's near and dear to our hearts, something we've been working on for quite a while now. And actually, I think it all started with an ESRC grant of like £4,000 in 2010 or something like this. And so this visit is about museums, but it's sort of continuing on all of this work where we're trying to figure out ways to help scientists and engineers think about the broader implications of their work, and having social scientists being sort of a key part of this, bringing their expertise to help bring the two cultures together.
And are you finding it quite a challenging approach to combining social scientists and scientists?
So Jamey and I have a unique position in this, which it turns out is identically the unique position that Emma and Jane have in this, in that I'm trained as a chemist, and Jamey's trained as a social scientist. And so we both have a sense of what our fields value. And that has been really key into getting buy-in from graduate students, from postdoc level people, and from PIs in either group to get them to be able to talk with each other. So it's an immensely challenging thing, but I think if you sort of boil it down to what each group needs to know about each other and what each group needs to know from what the other discipline studies, you can make inroads in sort of slowly, and once there's sort of a base knowledge, then it sort of picks up and things move pretty quickly.
Fantastic. And in terms of the work, do you see collaboration ongoing between the US and UK? Are there any kind of interesting differences in approaches or similarities that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, well, this is treading on dangerous ground, I think. But we are very lucky to be at an institution, which is actually quite rare in the United States, that really values interdisciplinarity, such that students are, in many cases, encouraged to look outside their traditional discipline. And there's plenty of students that we work with that come to us interested in this sort of thing. And that makes a huge difference. As soon as you force somebody to try to step outside their discipline, all is lost. And I think some of our colleagues here at Edinburgh, finding people willing to do that is a bit more of a struggle.
There does seem to be a cultural change happening here, just from the conversations I've heard over the last week, which is sort of pushing for this to happen more. But at ASU, we have the luxury of it's almost a top-down directive from the president down that says this is part of our culture now, and institutional barriers at least have dissolved. Whether or not interpersonal barriers still exist, that's person by person.
So basically, watch this space as to what Edinburgh, UK could learn from the approach that you're finding to be so beneficial in the US?
Well, I don't know that I'd be so bold to say that. I mean, certainly the approaches that Jane and Emma have are, reasonably similar and developed independently of what we have done. And the question is do the institutions support that? We feel lucky that our institution does. I think here it can be a little more challenging. Although the forum and Inogen and that sort of stuff builds a culture, at least small pieces of that culture that allow that to happen.
Great.
Of course, they're situated within an institution which is how many hundreds of years old? And change becomes more and more difficult the stronger the walls are.
Well, and the walls are like this thick on any given building, and they're made out of stone.
But there's potential, and it's a case of watch this space to see what could.
Yeah, I think the collaboration that we have with them, and that increasingly I think we're finding scholars moving back and forth between Edinburgh and Arizona State. Some of our students at Arizona State are now here as graduate students. So there's a lot of a lot of activity between the two institutions, and I think that's just good. And I think we'll see good things come out of it.
Yeah, and there's a reason why we come to the forum is because we see exciting things happening here.